Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi. On Thursday, June the 8th, District Attorney Michael Dougherty announced that there will be no criminal charges filed in regards to the Marshall Fire, which sparked, of course, back in December of 2021, and that ultimately led to 2 deaths and the destruction of over 1,000 homes in the Boulder suburbs of Louisville and Superior, primarily. Now, the Marshall Fire investigation on Thursday, June the 8th, said that a dormant blaze on a religious group's property and a second fire likely sparked by XL Energy equipment led to the start of that wildfire. And so for a bit more about why, specifically why, there were no charges filed, 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor. Whitney, first of all, when you first heard or saw that, what was your reaction? Were you surprised that there were no charges filed?
I had mixed feelings because I didn't know the evidence, and so I watched the whole press conference just this week, and the DA, Michael Dougherty, went into great detail about how they came to their conclusion. It was a 17-month investigation, and based on his presentation and then ultimately reading their report, which they have posted on the sheriff's website, I'm not surprised because the prosecution, the DA, has to consider, was a crime committed? Can they prove it? What are the resources? And all these other factors. And so they looked at this thing in great detail and determined that no, we couldn't prove these criminal aspects. And there were really two issues. 3 issues that they looked at was where the fire started from, and what they concluded was there was first the El Dorado Springs fire, and what happened in that one was the religious group was burning some rubbish. The fire department was called. They went out and they said, oh, it's a controlled burn. They said it's going to happen for about 2 more hours. They had a swimming pool next to it, so the owners of the property said, once we do this burn, we're gonna cover it with dirt, and they showed them the equipment and the ability to do that, and so the fire department said, okay, and they left. Well, so that was on December 24th, and they did cover it just with dirt. Well, 6 days later, because of the wind and everything else, those embers picked up, and that was one cause of the fire. That's what they're calling the El Dorado Springs fire. Well, down south of that is the Trailhead fire, and that's one they're alleging, according to the investigation, that was started by XL. And what happened was one of their poles, the wire became unmoored and shot out some particles that started a fire in that brush. And so eventually those 2 fires met and created the Marshall fire. And they don't know, the investigation didn't, these investigators, they weren't concerned or at what point the fire met and that kind of thing. They just wanted to know where it started, and so they concluded it started in these 2 places. And so their criminal analysis is, could we prove arson? And there were kind of 2 components that the DA got into, and there's 2 aspects of arson. They had to do it knowingly and then recklessly. And so knowingly says that they know the conduct is practically certain to cause the result.
And this is clearly not arson, or this is not that.
Right, they didn't knowingly, right? They covered it up. The fire department said, okay. XL didn't have any notice that their equipment was damaged. And then recklessly, that means they had to know that the result was going to be certain and then consciously disregard a substantial and unjustifiable risk. And here they're saying, they didn't do those things, or we can't prove it. Now, they did that detailed investigation over 17 months looking at those specific issues. Inevitably, there will be civil lawsuits, and in those lawsuits, there's going to be a ton of different experts. And so there may be information that comes out at that time that may change the district attorney's position. So there could be criminal charges later. I don't think so, based on the detail and level of investigation they've already done. But again, once you're going to have a lot of parties in these civil lawsuits and a lot of experts, and more information will come out. So there could be criminal charges down the road.
Could be criminal or civil charges down the road.
There could be criminal. He could, if more information comes out and they determine, okay, they did this. I doubt it. Now, to the civil charges, yes, there will be civil claims, not charges. There will be civil lawsuits filed by the homeowners, people who were damaged by the fire, and most of them will go after Excel because it's the deep pocket. But you're going to have all of the homeowners and their insurance companies, because it's really the insurance companies that are behind the lawsuits. They're paying for them. They're paying for the lawyers. They decide when cases should settle or not. People don't know that when they're sitting on the jury. So, you know, if we're in a car accident and you hit me, it's your insurance company who's making the decisions about what to pay out, what to settle. And it's my insurance company, if I filed a claim, doing the same thing. But if we went to trial, I'd be sitting at the plaintiff's table and you'd be sitting at the defendant's table, and the jury would assume, you know, that it's us, but it's really the insurance company. So if I got a judgment against you, you're presumably, if you had insurance, your insurance company covers it. So here in this case, even though there's going to be, I expect a bunch of plaintiffs, a bunch of homeowners to sue Excel, even though Excel is sitting in the defendant's seat, it's really their insurance company that's making the decision. And Excel will I believe, be based on this report, there's going, I mean, you know, they can say, well, your home was damaged because of the fire started by the 12 tribes, right? So there's going to be a lot of finger pointing, but this is why it's going to be years and years of litigation, and it's very expensive.
Interesting indeed. Well, I guess when it comes back to other fires, are there other fires of note? I'm thinking about maybe the Camp Fire in 2017 in Northern California. Is there precedent for what happens in these kinds of cases?
Well, there is precedent, but here you have the issue, and a lot of that, though, depends on who was responsible for the fire. And this is why they have the experts, and they'll have a bunch of experts, and they, you know, this investigation and all the materials that were used during the investigation are on the sheriff's website, the Boulder County Sheriff's website. So folks, and I went on there and looked at it, so you can look at it and you can see all the detail, the level of information. Like, for example, they took the pole and the wire down from Excel. They had a bunch of different experts looking at it. They went through all of their equipment, all of their data, and that's how they reached their conclusion. But in these civil lawsuits, there will be more of that kind of investigation. So it's going to be pretty extensive.
You know, one thing that stood out to me from Thursday's press conference is Michael Dougherty, the DA who was in charge of all this, he went out of his way to explain not only the legal case, but he also kind of explained the emotional aspect. He said, you know, obviously with the Marshall Fire, it was such a high-profile event that a lot of people were impacted by, that there is an emotional wanting and needing to make charges and to essentially kind of blame someone or something in this case. And he went kind of into pretty lengthy ways to address that part of it. Is that common for that to happen?
No, that's a great point. It's not common. This is a very unusual situation. Now, it's not uncommon for a district attorney to explain to a family who's maybe somebody's been victimized or murdered, to say, here's why we can't go after this person. And that feels very personal and is extremely difficult. So here, I think he did a great job of balancing the legal and touching on the human aspect, saying, look, I know the damage that this did to this community and how hard it is. Now, there's two sides to that, because on one side, there's two sides of that coin, if you will. On the one side is, he should have filed charges. I want somebody to be accountable. There was a crime committed. This should have never happened. The other side of the coin, though, I've litigated for 25 years, and I've had clients who have won cases and said, if I knew it was this hard, I wouldn't have done the case, even though I won. And the reason is because you can't stop thinking about it. It's always in the back of your mind, even if you're not actively engaged in the case at the moment, and it takes years and years. It's just always sort of going on in the back of your mind. That's my experience as a trial attorney and how my clients have experienced this. So here, they would have to give depositions. They would have to read documents. They'd have to give information. It's constant. So in many ways, I would say, as the lawyer, I'm not. I don't want to minimize the extreme pain and damage. But as a lawyer, one thing I would say to them is there is some benefit in being able to move forward, because if this criminal proceeding went on for the next 2 years, they're going to be involved. They're going to be watching. They're going to be showing up to hearings, these kind of things. So this is one way to be able to move forward, because now you can start to let it go. Now, of course, there's going to be, some people will elect, I don't even want to sue civilly. My homeowners covered it. I'm just going to move forward with my life. But there's other people where they're fighting with their homeowners right now. The policy isn't covering everything. Insurance companies, they're in business, and so they try to avoid coverage whenever they can. I mean, notwithstanding all the insurance commercials that we see about being in good hands and they're going to take care of you and everything, insurance companies try not to pay out money, and of course they do, but sometimes it may be a fight, and I've seen already some folks having difficulty with their homeowners policy, and so they may say, you know what, I'm good. I got my house rebuilt. I'm just going to move forward. And there'll be other people who say, no, somebody needs to pay for this. And either position, I think, is completely reasonable.
This is really good advice for some of the families, good things to kind of think about there. Any final thoughts in terms of what we saw on Thursday from that press conference?
No, I just thought the press conference, I thought the DA, who I've never met, I've seen him now, he's been in the press recently for the Boulder shooting and a number of other things. I was impressed with the level of detail, the presentation, the disposition. I get why criminal charges were not filed. I would expect there's going to be a lot of civil litigation, and it's going to be complicated and expensive and time-consuming. And hopefully, for the victims, the survivors, for their case, that it resolves quickly. Because it's, when you're in litigation, whether it's watching a criminal trial or participating in the civil trial, it's taking off the Band-Aid every time you have to go and testify. How did this impact you? Because you have to remember, if there's civil claims filed, you have compensatory damages, so that's to make them whole. So anything that wasn't covered by insurance. And of course, the insurance companies are going to be saying it should be Excel's insurance. No, it should be the homeowner's insurance. But either way, they need to be made whole. Then there can be these non-economic damages, so the emotional distress. And that's where somebody gets on the stand and says, I was running out of the house with my child screaming. Like, that's real trauma. Then there can be an aspect of punitive damages, and that's to punish the company. And so here, if the records show that Excel knew or they should have known, which according to what they've done already, that wasn't the case. But if, let's say, Excel had an idea and there was, somebody sent an email saying, hey, if we don't get this tied down, it could create a fight, something like that. I have no idea if there's any evidence of that out there. But when those kind of things come out against the corporation in this age of corporate malfeasance, a jury will hit them hard with punitive damages. Now, on the other hand, if Excel comes in and says, look, we did our regular checks. There was no indication that this was going to happen. It was just a perfect storm, literally and figuratively. Then people will say, yeah, they did what they could. So they may not want to punish them. But these are all the types of damages you can get in the civil trial. So that's going to be years and years in the making. Even if it settles, I think it's going to take some time. Just there's so many moving parts.
Absolutely. Well, obviously a lot of trauma for the families involved in this, but we did learn about the no criminal charges. We now got our answer as to why and how things may proceed with civil cases moving forward. But in the meantime, 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor, thanks so much for joining us and explaining all this for us.
For sure. Good to be here.